Hello and welcome. This video wraps up the series about the evolution of naming conventions throughout the history of the Roman state. If you're interested in how they evolved from the foundation of the city to the late antiquity, you should watch the first three parts. This one deals with the naming customs in the Eastern Roman Empire, starting at around the 7th century AD. So without further ado, let's begin. If you've watched my previous videos about Roman names or read something else on the topic, you might know that the ancient Roman males used to have three names. The most famous of them, for example, had a personal name Gaius, a clan name Iulius, and a family name Caesar. But this system of three names, or tria nomina, was already changing during the early days of the empire in the 1st century BC. By the time the last Western emperor abdicated in AD 476, praenomina were long gone. The number of families who still used the old nomen gentilicium could be counted on one hand. The cognomen was the last prominent remnant of the old system, but even it wouldn't survive for long. The plague and the devastating Italian wars of the 6th century all but extinguished the Roman senatorial class. Very few have survived, even fewer decided to stay in Rome. A good portion of the Latin-speaking aristocrats fled the wars and Gothic persecutions to Constantinople, and in a couple of generations assimilated into the Greek-speaking East. The old Latin West was gone, and so were the remnants of the old tria nomina. There were occasional reminders of the Latin tradition, like using Flavius as a title or adopting Tiberius as a regnal name, but those became extremely rare past the year 700. In the 8th century, the empire almost completely reverted to the old Hellenistic single name practice. Family names are very infrequent on documents and seals dated from between the 7th and the 10th century, and belong mostly to the foreign dignitaries. This development isn't hard to explain. Greek culture was far less family-oriented than Roman. The upper class of the Roman East was based on the imperial bureaucracy and higher echelons of the military, making the new nobility more meritocratic than hereditary. There was no need to announce your familial affiliation in a society that didn't care much about it. A single personal name would suffice. So what were those personal names? Keep in mind that I'm mostly using the anglicized forms of the names, while in reality they'd obviously be spelled and pronounced in a specific medieval Greek manner. A deeply religious society of the empire expectedly favored the names with Christian connotations. These can be roughly divided into three categories: biblical names, names of later saints, and Greek names formed with the root theo, meaning God. Biblical names were very popular for both men and women. These were ancient Hebrew and Aramaic names of the characters from both the Old and the New Testaments. Isaac, Joseph, and Maria were always among the favorites. The names of the saints were predominantly Old Greek, like Demitrios, Nicholas, and Andronicus, with few notable additions from Latin, like Maurice and obviously Constantine. Association with a well-known saint was almost a requirement for an Old Greek name to be popular in the Byzantine era. That's why Georgios and Demetrios appear very frequently, but you'd be hard-pressed to find a Byzantine Leonidas, Aristotle, or Seleucus. Even the name Alexander was relatively rare. Old Greek female names obeyed the same rule for the most part. Christian tradition carried the names like Helena, Zoe, Irene, and Sophia to high prominence, while the names without Christian connotations, like Cassandra and Olympias, are hard to find in that era. The Theo names were truly numerous in variety. Those of you familiar with Eastern Roman history may have heard of emperors Theodosius, Theophilos, and Theodore, but these three are only scratching the surface of the list. There is also Theodotos, Theophobos, Theognostos, Theoctistos, Theophanes, Theophylactos, and the list goes on. Female names followed the same pattern, just with a feminine suffix at the end. Some of these names made it all the way to the Anglophone world, so now we have Teddy Bear, Breakfast at Tiffany's, and Dora the Explorer. When it comes to popularity, you might have guessed that Constantine would be number one, but that wasn't quite the case. To determine which names were the most popular, we can scour the database of Byzantine seals from Dunbarton Oaks Research Institute. The database contains 15,000 lead seals, which are categorized by century. Doing searches of different names in this database reveals that the name Constantine is consistently high in popularity, but never the number one. Male names that surpass Constantine are Michael, Theodore, and John, with the last one being an undisputed champion. Nicholas, George, and Leo are also close in frequency of appearance to Constantine. Unfortunately, we can't do the same for the female names, because they rarely appear in official correspondence. Best we can do is to rely on the frequency in historical sources. This would suggest that Zoe, Theophano, and Helena were the most popular names for Byzantine girls. In absence of established family names, the nicknames took their place. As usual, they came from different sources, such as occupation, place of origin, or personal traits. In the future, these nicknames would serve as the basis of the new family names. Hereditary family names reappear in the Eastern Roman chronicles in the 9th century, during the reign of the Macedonian dynasty. There are two interconnected factors that contributed to their reappearance. The first is the emergence of the new social class, the Anatolian landed aristocracy. The loss of the empire's southeastern possessions made Anatolia into a frontier region. The landowning class of this new frontier formed a tight-knit community to coordinate their collective defense against the Arab raids. The first families to form strong dynasties were the descendants of military commanders assigned to the eastern provinces. It's no coincidence that one of the first Byzantine family names is Doukas, which is a Greek calque of the title dux, roughly translated as general. This is the same word that became duke in the English language. Family connections became more important for this new provincial nobility than for the urban aristocracy, so naturally they started using family names much earlier than people of the capital. Another important factor was the Armenian influence. Armenia had a long-standing tradition of hereditary nobility. Families like Bagratuni and Mamikonian could trace their lineage back 1,000 years. The Anatolian landed aristocracy had a lot of contact with the Armenians. The families that came to dominate the Eastern Roman military in the 9th and 10th century, like Malinos and Phokas, intermarried with the Armenian nobility. Other families like the Kurkuai were themselves of Armenian origins. This proximity probably played a major role in the appearance of dynastic names in the Eastern Roman Empire. Soon the family name custom was adopted by the rest of the upper echelons of Byzantine society. The urban gentry derived their family names from the traits that made them rich, like Chalkias, the smith, or from districts within Constantinople, like Acropolites, the one from the Acropolis. This was effectively the start of modern European family name practice. Germanic culture that dominated the Western Europe at that point didn't have a hereditary name custom. Through the Italian city-states and other diplomatic contacts of the empire, this new practice gradually spread to the rest of the Christian world. Unique language traits made Greek surnames different from those in Romance and Germanic languages. Greek has gendered surnames, so a woman's family name would have a different suffix than a man's. A daughter of Alexios Komnenos is Anna Komnini. A daughter of Andronicus Doukas is Irini Doukina, and a niece of Constantine Paleolochos is Zoe Paleologina. The last big development in the Eastern Roman naming customs can be attributed to the rise of the Komnenoi dynasty. During the reign of Emperor Alexios I, the imperial politics became much more of a dynastic affair than it used to be. Now the various courtiers strove to emphasize their connection to the ruling dynasty, no matter how tenuous it was. Soon people started adopting multiple surnames of their noble relatives to get some extra prestige. This reminded of nothing more than the familial politics of the Roman Republic. No one of the Eastern Roman nobility was able to rival the legendary "that guy." But there is a documented man who had 9 names. His full name was John Doukas Angelos Paleolochos Raoul Laskaris Tornikes Philanthropenos Asanes. There may not be a lot of similarities between the late Byzantine Empire and the Roman Republic of old, but the proclivity for ridiculously long names is something they have in common. And this concludes our venture into the history of Roman names. I'll put the list of my sources in the description. If you still have questions left or need some clarifications, feel free to ask me in the comments. Thanks a lot for watching till the end, and I will see you in the next one.